plans does the Minister have in mind to mitigate the likelihood of disproportionate numbers of women being made redundant with no financial support available to them?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady for that, and as I say, it's so important that we get the economy up and running again. We can only do this by people actually joining and working with us on hands, face space to make sure that we can reduce the transmission rate and save as many jobs as possible. But clearly we've launched the job support scheme, and that plus universal credit means that the lowest paid employees can have around 80% of their salary covered between those two schemes.
Richard Holden.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As our Prime Minister often says, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So this government has made it its mission to rectify this, and equality of opportunity is at the heart of the work of the Department for Education, including opportunity areas, access to higher education work, and reforms to further education, such as the flagship T-levels. Because, Mr. Speaker, we recognise that education has an unparalleled ability to create and unlock opportunities across the nation.
Richard Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for her answer. In North West Durham, we see lower educational outcomes, especially amongst white working class pupils who are getting disproportionately poor results. What measures is the government taking to ensure better attainment at both age 16, 18 and in later life, to not only deliver greater opportunity for individuals, but to level up all of our communities?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is absolutely vital that we raise school standards and outcomes and across the education sector to raise up and level up our country, which is why we established Opportunities North East. And tomorrow I'm chairing the board meeting to discuss this very work. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that my honourable friend is a tremendous advocate for his constituency, and I and education ministers will continue to work with him to ensure that the young people of Durham North West get the chances and the choices that they deserve.
We now have a substantive question to Minister Bedenow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK continues to be recognised as one of the most progressive countries globally for LGBT rights. The government recently announced £3.2 million of new funding to help Commonwealth governments and civil society repeal outdated discriminatory laws against LGBT people. We work closely with the Council of Europe and the UN in addition to co-chairing the Equal Rights Coalition, and remain committed to delivering an ambitious international LGBT conference.
Let's head to Reigate with Crispin Blunt. Crispin Blunt.
My honourable friend will understand that the decision not to amend the Gender Recognition Act will inevitably see the United Kingdom fall quite significantly in the tables of countries seen to be committed to the delivery of equality for LGBT plus people. Could she and her Equalities Department today do something to address that by committing to the delivery of an 18-week waiting time for gender identity clinics and gender identity development services for children as an outcome of the review by Dr. Hilary Cass?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and we've noted the concerns that he has raised about the government's decision, but we would assure him that the UK has a strong record on LGBT rights. We also know that the wait for gender identity clinics has been very long. This is an issue that the government is looking at. I'm not going to make a specific commitment at the dispatch box, but I do recognise the concern he has raised, and we will continue to do what we can to speed things up.
Sean Bailey.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In June, the Prime Minister asked me to lead cross-government work on this with a particular focus on ethnicity. I will update the House on the findings of my work in full tomorrow. However, I can say that this work has involved extensive engagement from the Race Disparity Unit and myself with colleagues and external stakeholders, including academics and experts from UCL, LSE, and University of Oxford, medical experts from the British Medical Association, and also many ministerial colleagues, and we will continue to redouble our efforts on this. It's crucial that we make evidence-based decisions on this important work.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the unfortunate impacts of COVID-19 has been the impact on attainment within our communities, and as we've heard, white working class communities in particular, with the educational attainment gaps that we've seen there, have struggled during this crisis. I represent Prince's End, which has one of the highest rates of child poverty in the whole of the West Midlands. Can my honourable friend assure me, as part of that work across government, she will look in particular at ensuring that opportunity gaps as a result of COVID-19 are not widened?
My right honourable friend is right to raise the importance of children of all backgrounds of being in school and their educational attainment and well-being more broadly. The government has been very clear that limiting attendance at schools should be a last resort. We are providing laptops to the most disadvantaged pupils, 4G routers for families who don't already have mobile or broadband, for example. But more broadly on disparities in attainment, the Commission for Race and Ethnic Disparities is looking at outcomes for the whole population. That means ethnic minorities and white British people as well. The Commission will set out a new positive agenda for change and will look at the issues that he has raised.
Gretchen Fletcher.
Question number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, we're making good progress in getting more girls and women into STEM, with a 31% increase in girls studying STEM subjects since 2010 and 1 million women now working in core STEM occupations.
Professor Sarah Gilbert in vaccine research, Kate Bingham in vaccine operations, Baroness Harding in testing, Dr. Jenny Harries in medicine. All fantastic examples of highly qualified professionals leading the UK's response to this once-in-a-century pandemic, and they all happen to be women in STEM. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that they are setting a wonderful example for future generations of girls and boys in South Ribble, Lancashire and beyond?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. They are a huge asset to our country. But what more women in STEM is also doing is helping close the wage gap and helping our economy recover post-COVID. Around 35% of the wage gap can be overcome if we get more women working in high-paid occupations and sectors such as engineering and technology.
Heather Wheeler.
Question number 13, Mr. Speaker, please.
Secretary of Trust.
As much as £250 billion could be added to the UK economy if women started and scaled businesses at the same rate as men. I'm determined that trade should play its part in opening up greater opportunities for women, both in the UK and across the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for her first answer. Can my right honourable friend tell me what the UK will be doing to build on our close ties with Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam to expand trading opportunities, especially for women, particularly given Vietnam's membership of the CPTPP?
First of all, we've appointed a splendid trade envoy for those three countries who's going to do a brilliant job promoting opportunities for women and everyone through free trade agreements. And my honourable friend is absolutely right. CPTPP contains important provisions to open up trade for women, and of course Vietnam is a key part of that agreement.
Mr. Speaker, police up and down the country and number 14.
Minister Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is clear that it is unacceptable that women seeking or staff providing healthcare advice should feel intimidated or harassed. The Home Office has been keeping this important matter under review. We are now considering again whether more should be done to protect those accessing or providing abortion services, and have reached out to service providers and the police to understand their experiences of these protests. But the impact on women is, of course, at the centre of our considerations.
Dr. Ruperhope.
Speaker, it's a very encouraging reply from the Minister, because right now, up and down the country, women are being intimidated and police are having their time taken up with 40 Days for Life, an anti-choice group running a 40-day protest outside clinics in Spain, in France, in Australia, in Canada. They have legislation to do this. I'm encouraged by what she says. Can I ask her to please follow suit and take heed of the bill that we had in June? Overwhelming support for this House to do the same here.
I have the pleasure of meeting the Honourable Lady and indeed my Honourable friend for Harwich and North Essex later today to discuss this topic. She will know the meticulous approach that we have applied to this very important issue. There is a balance to be struck with the right to express and to have free freedom of speech. But clearly, the impact on women and staff working in these centres is really important, and I'm very pleased that PSPOs are working in her area and 2 other areas. Manchester, I understand, has just received an order or implementing an order as well, and we have to very much balance those matters in mind, but I look forward to continuing this discussion in only a few hours' time.
Topicals Fleet Drummond.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, alongside sex, race and sexual orientation, geography and social economic status can affect opportunity. I want to widen the focus of our understanding of equality to include outcomes for white working class children so we can ensure we're levelling up our country. I've therefore asked the Equality Hub to consider the importance of geography and background alongside factors such as sex, ethnicity and disability. This will make sure we truly level up Britain.
Drummond.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission should be focused on its responsibility to enforce equality and human rights law?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I'm delighted that we've been able to put forward Baroness Kishwar Faulkner as our preferred candidate to chair the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and I know that she is committed to making sure the focus of the Commission is on enforcing our important equality laws.
We're heading over to the Shadow Minister, Marcia de Cover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Equality Act sets out that the government must seek to advance equality of opportunity in relation to its functions. Yet throughout this pandemic, ministers have repeatedly failed to do so. It is vital that the government takes proactive steps to prevent the disproportionate impact of COVID on disabled, Black, Asian and ethnic minority people. Failure to do so is neglect, it is discriminatory and it is unlawful. So what evidence does the minister have that her government is fulfilling its public sector equality duty as set out in the Equality Act?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is completely false to say that the government has not acted and deliberately ignores the significant measures we have put in place to reduce the spread of the virus in all communities across the United Kingdom, which we have repeatedly stated in this House. As I mentioned earlier, I will be making a full oral statement tomorrow, but it is known that we have taken many key measures to ensure that NHS frontline staff in particular from ethnic minority backgrounds are best protected and to ensure we fully understand the links between the virus and ethnicity.
Marshal de Colvoa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2,500 deaths could have been avoided during the first wave of the pandemic had people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities been adequately protected. Last month, I wrote to the Minister asking what steps her government had taken to address the disproportionate impact on COVID, but I have yet to receive a reply, and we are now in a second wave. The Minister says she will be giving a statement tomorrow, but I asked the Minister, as it is oral questions today, she still hasn't given an update on the progress of implementing the recommendations from Public Health England's report. It has been over 4 months, so can she give us an update on those 7 recommendations and when they will be fully implemented?
The Shadow Minister has written many, many letters to me over the last 4 months, and I have replied them. It is simply untrue to say that she has not received a reply. She knows that the work that we're doing is what has been taking the recommendations in progress throughout government. The oral statement will give ample time tomorrow for me to fully address and explain all the work that government has been doing and what the evidence has shown us. And I would encourage her to attend the oral statement tomorrow because there's very much that she could learn on this topic.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister tell us what assessment has been made and what steps are being taken to look at the impact that the increasing numbers of COVID-19 cases and the pandemic is having on the LGBTQ+ community in this country?
We have been looking at the disproportionate impact that the virus has had on very many groups. That is not a group that we have seen a disproportionate impact in terms of the effects of the virus. What has impacted that community is their inability to access healthcare services like the rest of the population. And that is something which we hope is going to be addressed in terms of how we are managing local lockdowns and being able to keep pressure off the NHS.
Heading to North Devon with Selene Saxby. Selene Saxby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend detail what steps her department is taking to ensure that girls are able to access period products during the pandemic, especially when only 41% of schools are taking advantage of the government's offer of free period products? And in this Environmental Week, does my right honourable friend also agree with me that wherever possible, these products should be free of plastic?
The government is taking a range of action to ensure that everyone is able to access affordable period products. We are providing fully funded access to free period products in schools and colleges across England. The scheme remained in operation during partial school closures, and we expect uptake of it to significantly increase as schools have fully opened. The scheme provides a wide range of products, including environmentally friendly tampons and pads, alongside reusable products such as menstrual cups and reusable pads.
That's the end of the questions. We're now moving on to questions to the Prime Minister. We start with questions to the Prime Minister with Catherine West. Catherine West.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the thoughts of the whole House will be with the Honourable Member for Bolton South East. I'm sure members from across the House will want to join me in wishing her a speedy recovery. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Catherine West.
Mr. Speaker, could I associate myself with those kind remarks on behalf of my honourable friend from Bolton? And my constituents are reeling from the 9% contraction of the economy since March of this year. Unemployment has skyrocketed and joblessness in Haringey is the highest in the capital. Unfortunately, we are at the same time facing the idea that there could be a congestion tax forced onto 4 million extra Londoners by this government. These Londoners already facing the double whammy of COVID and the double whammy of financial ruin. Will the Prime Minister please immediately stop the imposition of this dreadful plan? I look forward to his answer.
Mr. Speaker, I must respectfully inform the Honourable Lady that the current Mayor of London had effectively bankrupted TfL before coronavirus had even hit and left a massive black hole in its finances, and any need to make up that deficit is entirely down to him. It is entirely his responsibility. Any expansion of the congestion charge or any other measure taken to improve the finances of TfL are entirely the responsibility of the bankrupt current Labour Mayor of London.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, people of the length and breadth of the country have made many sacrifices over the last few months to try to suppress COVID-19. But infection rates are increasing fast and Buckinghamshire may soon find itself in Tier 2. Can my right honourable friend tell the people of my Aylesbury constituency how long we'd be expected to stay there, what additional help there'd be for local businesses, and crucially, what the route out would be?
Thank you. Well, I hope reassure my honourable friend by telling him that the incidence in the Vale of Aylesbury is in fact less than half the England average, and the way forward for the Vale of constituents in the Vale of Aylesbury and everywhere else is for everyone to keep following the guidance, observing the new restrictions, but obviously washing hands, wearing a face covering in enclosed spaces and keeping a sensible distance, Mr. Speaker.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for his remarks about the Honourable Member for Bolton South East. Prime Minister, how does an area which goes into Tier 3 restrictions get out of those restrictions?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the simplest and most effective way for areas to get out of those restrictions is, of course, to get the R down to 1 or below, and I'm very pleased to say that some areas are already having a considerable effect with the measures that they're taking.
Yes, Tom.
Mr. Speaker, can I press the Prime Minister on that answer? If the infection rate R in a Tier 3 area has not come below 1, will it be possible in any circumstances for that area to come out of Tier 3 if the R hasn't come below 1?
Mr. Speaker, obviously the R is one of the measures that we look at, and we'll take a decision based on a number of things, including the R, but also, of course, rates of infection, rates of admission to hospital, and other data. But the most important thing is for areas that do go into Tier 3, and I'm very grateful to local leadership in the areas that have gone into Tier 3, because it's the right thing for them to do, the right thing for their constituents, the right thing to save lives. When they are able to make progress, and of course they will come out of Tier 3. And as he knows full well, the measures that are put in place are reviewed every 28 days.
Stop.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm now confused by the Prime Minister's answer. If it's not the R rate under 1, what is it? Because millions of people want to know the answer to that question, because millions of them are in Tier 3 and millions more are likely to go into Tier 3. They really need to know. And Prime Minister, on Friday, the Chief Scientific Officer said Tier 3 on its own certainly isn't enough to get the R rate below 1. On the same day, the Prime Minister himself said there was only a chance of getting infection rates down. This goes to the heart of the issue in Greater Manchester and elsewhere, because the widespread fear, Prime Minister, is that Tier 3 is the worst of all worlds. It brings significant economic harm without getting the virus sufficiently under control to exit Tier 3. So instead of being a solution, Tier 3 is a gateway to weeks and weeks, more likely months and months of agony, from which there's no likely exit. Can the Prime Minister not see the problem if there isn't a clear exit?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I've made it absolutely clear that a part of the country going into Tier 3 is only in there for 28 days. We will review it after 28 days, and areas that have gone into Tier 3, I believe, are already making progress, and areas where there are restrictions in place are also showing signs of progress. We are pursuing, Mr. Speaker, a local, a regional approach, which is the sensible approach for this country. That's what the epidemiology supports. It's what the Deputy Chief Medical Officer supported last night. And again, I want to thank local leadership in Merseyside, in Lancashire, actually in London and West Midlands and elsewhere for what they are doing. And I may say that it is a bit incoherent of the right honourable gentleman opposite to attack local lockdowns when he wants to plunge the whole country back into a damaging lockdown for weeks on end, and he has no clue about how he would propose to get the country out of that, does he?
Yes, Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate there's going to be a review every 28 days, but if the R rate hasn't come below 1, then the infection rate is still going up, and the numbers are going up, and the admissions are going up, and the numbers in hospital are going up, and the deaths are going up. Is the Prime Minister seriously saying that he would take a Tier 3 area out of Tier 3 with the R above 1? I don't think so. Let me spell out what this means. On Friday, thousands of people in Greater Manchester, taxi drivers, pub and hospitality workers, people working in betting shops, the self-employed and freelancers, will either be out of work or face significant pay cuts. That's the reality on Friday in Greater Manchester. But their rent and their mortgage won't be lower, their food and their heating bills won't be lower, and that could last for months. Why can't the Prime Minister and the Chancellor understand this? Stop bargaining with people's lives, stop dividing communities, and provide the support that's needed in Manchester.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud that this government has already given Greater Manchester £1.1 billion in support for business, £200 million in extra unring-fenced funding, £50 million to tackle infections in care homes, £20 million for tests and trace, another £22 million for local response that we announced yesterday. And yesterday, the Mayor of Greater Manchester was offered a further £60 million, which he turned down, Mr. Speaker, with no encouragement, I may say, to support from the right honourable gentleman. So what I can tell the House today, Mr. Speaker, is that that cash will be distributed to the boroughs of Greater Manchester. And I want to thank my honourable and right honourable colleagues across the House for Haywood and Middleton, from Bolton North West, from Bolton North East, from Bury South, Bury North, Cheadle, Lee, Altrincham and Sale West, and Hazel Grove for the support that they have given in this matter, Mr. Speaker.
This is a Prime Minister that can pay £7,000 a day for consultants on track and trace, which isn't working, that can find £43 million for a garden bridge that was never built, but he can't find £5 million for the people of Greater Manchester. I really think the Prime Minister's crossed a Rubicon here, not just with the miserly way that he's treated Greater Manchester, but the grub it, take it or leave it way these local deals are being done. It's corrosive to public trust to pit region against region, mayor against mayor, council against council, asking them to trade away their businesses and jobs. We need a one-nation approach. Replace these endless local battles with clear national criteria and proper support for jobs. Labour's motion this afternoon would do that. Why won't the Prime Minister support it?
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the support that we've given, the one nation Conservative support that we've given to the entire country. £200 billion in support for jobs and livelihoods across the whole of the country already. A further £9.9 billion now for the Jobs Support Scheme. It is this government that has cut VAT for business, deferred business rates. There is no other country in Europe, Mr. Speaker, where so much support, so much help has been given to the population to get through this crisis, and we will continue to do that. But I think it is the height of absurdity, Mr. Speaker, that he stands up and attacks the economic consequences of the measures that we're obliged to take across some parts of the country when he wants to turn the lights out with a full national lockdown, taking kids... that was his policy last week anyway, wasn't it? Perhaps he could confirm that's still his policy. Is that what he wants to do?
Keir Starmer. Mr. Speaker, at his press conference yesterday, the Prime Minister produced heat maps across the country showing the infection rate up in all ages across all regions, and particularly showing regions that have been in the equivalent of Tier 2 restrictions for weeks, if not months, moving into Tier 3. Now, if they're moving into Tier 3, Tier 2 hasn't worked. Because if Tier 2 worked, they should be going to Tier 1. So Tier 2 goes to Tier 3. Tier 3 has no end because there's no prospect or confidence in the R rate coming below 1. And I do not believe that a Tier 3 region will come out of those restrictions unless R is below 1 and whilst numbers are still going up. So we now have a stark choice. And by the way, Prime Minister, Cornwall is the only place, possibly with the Isle of Wight, where the infection rate today is less than Greater Manchester when it went into local restrictions. So this idea that some areas are immune is wrong. So there's a stark choice. Carry on with the Prime Minister's approach, which will lead to weeks and weeks and months of prolonged agony in all your constituencies for millions of people in Tier 2 and 3 with no exit, or put in place a 2 to 3 week time-limited circuit break to break the cycle and bring the virus back under control. Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland in part have chosen that path. With half-term starting this Friday, this may be the last opportunity for the Prime Minister to put in place an effective circuit break. The Prime Minister was too slow in the first phase of this pandemic. He's being too slow again. We cannot repeat this mistake. Will he act in the public interest and take the opportunity to put in place a circuit break this Friday?
Mr. Speaker, we will do whatever it takes to get this country through the crisis, with or without the support of the right honourable gentleman opposite. And I may say that I think that his policy, I've explained why I don't believe that his policy is the right one for the country, because it would involve closing schools, it would involve shuttering businesses, with all the psychological, the emotional damage that lockdown of that kind brings. He can't say how many circuit breakers he thinks would be necessary. He can't say how long they would go on. He can't say how much damage they would do to the UK economy and to people people's mental health, Mr. Speaker. We, on the other hand, want to go on with our commonsensical approach, which is a local and a regional approach, keeping kids in school, keeping our economy moving, because that is the way to get the whole of our country through this crisis together, so that we all, and particularly those regions that are now, alas, under Tier 3 restrictions, all the regions of the country bounce back strongly together, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Let's head up to Cheshire with Edward Timpson. Edward Timpson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After recent positive progress, COVID has disproportionately and adversely affected participation levels in female sport and physical activity. So to help reverse this, will my right honourable friend lend his support to the development of the first ever Women's and Girls Football National Centre of Excellence in Winsford, in my constituency, a £70 million project that he has previously expressed enthusiasm for, and help build female grassroots sport back better?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, and this is a very exciting project. I welcome Cheshire FA's commitment to providing a new world-class facility for women and girls football, and I look forward to the proposed opening of the centre in Winsford.
We're now heading to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford, audio only. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my thoughts are very much with the member for Bolton South East. I hope she makes a speedy recovery. Mr. Speaker, next week, just as the pandemic is worsening, the Tory government will scrap the furlough scheme in a move that will cause a wave of mass redundancies across the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the Prime Minister is complaining that he can't get by on his £150,000 salary. So can I ask the Prime Minister, if he's finding life such a struggle, how on earth does he expect many workers to get by on just £5.84 an hour when the Tory cuts to furlough sink in?
Mr. Speaker, actually, I'm proud of what we've done to support people on low incomes throughout this period, and indeed before. It was this government that raised the living wage by record amounts. We've just increased universal credit by about £1,000 a year, and he makes the point about furlough, Mr. Speaker, and as he knows, combine the universal credit with job support, the job support scheme that we've just announced, and workers will be getting 80% of their existing salary. We will get this country through this crisis, and we will continue to support people of low incomes throughout the period.
Turning to Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid the Prime Minister just simply doesn't get it. Yesterday we saw his total disregard for the people of Greater Manchester, a Tory attitude that people in Scotland are all too familiar with. Millions of families are struggling to get by, and this Tory government wants to cut their incomes in the middle of a pandemic. It is clear that the Prime Minister has made a deliberate decision to let unemployment soar, just like Thatcher did in the 1980s. Time is running out. With 1 week left, will the Prime Minister finally U-turn on his cuts to the furlough scheme and invest in our communities, or will he leave millions of people on the scrap heap?
Mr. Speaker, I really must reject what the right honourable gentleman has just said, because it bears no relation to the facts or the reality of what this government is doing to support people across the country. And it's not just the £200 billion investment in jobs and livelihoods. What we also are engaged in, and what we will continue to deliver, is a colossal investment in education, in health, in housing, in infrastructure, that will deliver jobs and growth throughout this United Kingdom for a generation, Mr. Speaker.
Andrew Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, I congratulate the Prime Minister and negotiating team for their strong stance in negotiations with the EU, and ask the Prime Minister whether he agrees with me that the EU's position on fishing and ECJ demonstrate they are not treating us as an independent state, they are not acting in good faith to deliver a free trade agreement, and in international law, the UK is therefore entitled to leave the withdrawal agreement and make its own arrangements regarding the UK's own internal market.
Well, Mr. Speaker, whatever the effect of the withdrawal agreement, I can certainly assure her that the UK's internal market, which I think everybody on both sides of the House values, is protected and upheld by the UK Internal Market Bill, which is going through another place at the moment, and also, of course, protecting the Good Friday Agreement.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, Mikey is severely disabled. He turned 18 last month, so he's one of the first to see his child trust fund mature. But Mikey's disabilities mean he can't manage his own finances, so he can't access these savings. Government rules on child trust fund mean his parents can't either, without paying expensive legal fees. This is Mikey's own money. He wants to use it to buy a specially adapted tricycle. So will the Prime Minister look at proposals that Mikey's father has shown me to end this injustice for disabled young people and let Mikey buy this trike?
Of course, Mr. Speaker, I will do whatever I can to help in the particular case that he raises. I don't know whether the tricycle he mentions is eligible for a number of the schemes that I can immediately call to mind. But if he cares to write to me, I will of course answer immediately.
Heading up to Harrow for Bob Blackman to land this question. Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Ground Control. My right honourable friend will be well aware of the negotiations going on between the Department for Transport and the current Mayor of London on a further bailout for Transport for London. The current Mayor is demanding an eye-watering £5.65 billion to keep TfL running for the next 18 months, yet he refuses to accept any economies because of offending his union paymasters. Can my right honourable friend confirm, however, that the government has not required the current Mayor of London to expand the congestion charge to the North and South Circular Roads?
Mr. Speaker, well, I can certainly confirm, as I said in my answer to the first question, is that the black hole in TfL's finances, the bankruptcy of TfL, which was left, by the way, in robust financial health by the previous mayor, Mr. Speaker, it certainly was, is entirely the fault of the current Labour Mayor of London, with his grossly irresponsible demagogic fare policies, which were never pursued by the previous Mayor of London, I may say, Mr. Speaker, and the fault lies entirely, therefore, with him, and I trust my honourable friend will make that clear.
Dr. Rupaha.
Mr. Speaker, financial support packages, tackling homelessness, rail nationalisation, honouring Marcus Rashford. There's plenty this government's done on COVID that I applaud. But with winter set to bite and no end to the virus in sight, can I ask the PM to reconsider the arbitrary end to many of his schemes set months ago when we knew so little? 3 million self-employed were completely out of all of these. And a number of them set to face destitution when the minimum income floor ends next month. And 3,272 kids in his own seat, 2016 in mind. School dinners are in the balance. Can he start by voting with us tonight and make sure that gong doesn't just mean nothing?
Sorry, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, can you just sit down? Please, we've got to have short questions. I want to get through the list. We've got to help each other. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Honourable Lady is quite right to call attention to the difficulties facing many families right now because of the crisis that we've been in. But the most important thing, and I think this is, I hope, common ground, actually, is to keep kids in school if we possibly can. That would be vitiated by the series of lockdowns that are being proposed. I don't want to go down that route. And what I want to do is to make sure that we continue to support families throughout the crisis so that they have the cash available to feed their kids as they need to do.
On to a question, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted that Kettering General Hospital is part of the biggest hospital building programme in a generation. I can tell my honourable friend the Infrastructure Delivery Task Force is already involved in delivering the health infrastructure programme, which includes Kettering General Hospital.
The Polymer.
thank the Prime Minister for visiting the night shift at Kettering General Hospital in February and seeing for himself at first hand the wonderful work being done by local medics and staff. The hospital can expedite at speed ambitious plans for its rebuild, but only if the time taken for regulatory clearances at NHS improvement are dramatically shortened. Will the Prime Minister cut NHS red tape so local people can have the improvements we need at our local hospital as quickly as possible?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I hope I can reassure him by saying that clinical modelling work is now complete and the site development is now underway, Mr. Speaker, as we speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 16th of June, the Prime Minister agreed to provide free school meal vouchers to hungry children over the summer holidays, after claiming that just 24 hours beforehand, he was completely unaware of the campaign that was calling for it. Last week, Liberal Democrat Education Minister for Wales, Kirsty Williams, guaranteed that free school meal provision during school holidays would continue until at least Easter 2021, and yesterday the Scottish Government committed to do the same. So, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister confirm that he is indeed aware of these announcements, and if so, when does he plan to do the right thing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, governments of all stripes have supplied free school meals since 1906, and I'm proud that it was this Conservative government that extended universal free school meals to 5, 6 and 7-year-olds. The party opposite were in power for 30 of the last 100 years and never did anything like that, Mr. Speaker. We support kids of low incomes in school, and we will continue to do so. But the most important thing is to keep them in school and not to go to tear off into another national lockdown, taking them out of school. And we will continue, Mr. Speaker, to use the benefit system and all the systems of income support to support young people, to support children throughout the holidays as well.
To South West with Sigurry Street. Sigurry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One lesson we've all learned in the past 9 months is that the internet is even more important to our lives than we imagined. So will my right honourable friend confirm today that despite COVID and all the other challenges he's grappling with, that we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to roll out full fibre superfast broadband across the United Kingdom and ensure that we are global leaders in digital connectivity? Thank you.
Yes, indeed. I thank my right honourable friend, for everything he does to lobby for that. And I can tell him that our local delivery partner in Devon and Somerset has provided connectivity of the kind he describes to 300,000 premises over the last across those two counties. And indeed, we are going to be a world leader in connectivity, Mr. Speaker, as we build back better.
To South London with Janet Davey. Janet Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister confirm that his government is seeking to force the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to remove free travel for under 18s and for holders of the 60-plus travel card in return for further financial support for TfL to keep the tubes and buses running? How can this be right when many people in London, and indeed in my constituency, already have months of genuine hardship ahead of them?
Mr. Speaker, it was the Labour Mayor of London who bankrupted TfL's finances, and any changes that he brings in are entirely his responsibility. And I suggest she holds him to account.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the Prime Minister is committed to doubling down on levelling up. Will he join me for a virtual tour of Stoke-on-Trent Central and a round table with key partners focused on delivering for the left behind, not least to ensure that the Transforming Cities Fund investment will revolutionise public transport in the city?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's an easy commitment for me to make, and I'm delighted to do so. And I can tell her that we're investing nearly £20 million through our city deal in pioneering a new programme of sustainable, low-carbon and low-cost heat energy to Stoke-on-Trent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 weeks ago, the Prime Minister stood at that dispatch box praising Luton as the only place to have come out of local restrictions. But praise doesn't pay the bills. Luton's proud industries of manufacturing, aviation and events can't get by on sound bites and figures that bear no relation to what's really happening to jobs and businesses. He knows entire industries are at stake. So is it his inaction
indifference or incompetence? Will he support businesses that need it and areas that need it throughout this crisis?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the people of Luton for their hard and indeed their heroic work, as I thank people across the country for what they are doing. And I want to support businesses in Luton, and that's why we want to continue with the sensible, balanced, regional, local approach that we are. And I hope she agrees with me that it would make no sense at all for businesses, hard-pressed businesses in Luton, if they had their lights turned off and their doors shuttered in a series of multiple lockdowns of a kind that are recommended by the party opposite.
Miller. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Aberconwy and North Wales are learning to live with COVID-19, but we're frustrated by national Welsh Government policy that seeks to place restrictions on us that are the same in the village of Cwm Penmachno as they are in the capital, Cardiff. Last week, my right honourable friend agreed that a shared responsibility is the way to tackle this pandemic. Does he see that the future of this is a series of rolling national lockdowns, or can businesses and residents hope that they will be given more trust to look after their own health and those they care for?
Well, I think my honourable friend really puts the distinction very, very clearly and sharply, and it's the commonsensical, balanced approach that we're following. I do think that where local leaders step up to the plate, and I was delighted that South Yorkshire came on board this morning. I had a great conversation with Dan Jarvis last night. Where local leadership is shown, we can really make huge progress in getting the R down, and that's the right approach for the country.
Heading up to Knowsley with Sir George Howard. Sir George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I return to the subject of free school meals? There are 7,108 children in Knowsley reliant on free school meals, which are vital in ensuring that they are properly fed. Whether to extend to Easter is both a moral and political choice. So will the Prime Minister make the right choice and agree to extend free school meals to Easter?
Mr. Speaker, of course we have free school meals throughout term time. That's entirely right. What we want to do is to make sure that we continue to support people on low incomes throughout the crisis, and that's also what we're going to do.
We're heading to Essex with Stephen Metcalfe. Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend will know, part of my constituency has now been placed into Tier 2 restrictions. Can he therefore reassure everyone that if they stick to the rules, observe the hands, face and space message, and self-isolate when required, accompanied by suitable enforcement for those who blatantly flout the law, we will come out of these restrictions all the sooner?
My honourable friend puts his finger on it, and that's exactly what we need to do. And I can tell him that just the areas that go into high levels of concern are reviewed every 14 days, and the restrictions, as I told the right honourable gentleman, are reviewed every 28 days. The way to get through it is exactly as he says, to follow the guidance, particularly the hands, face, space basics.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Barnes in my constituency have been cut off from public transport routes for some months now by the closure of Hammersmith Bridge. Can the Prime Minister confirm reports that the government is now planning to charge Barnes residents £15 a day to own a car and charge them extra council tax to pay for facilities that they cannot use, despite the fact that TfL reserves were increasing before the virus hit?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that Hammersmith Bridge has been closed entirely thanks to the incompetence of the current Labour Mayor of London, and that Sean Bailey, the Conservative candidate, is going to reopen it, and that is the best thing. That is the best thing possible.
Let's head to Reigate with Crispin Blunt. Crispin Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend leads the country through Brexit and delivers global Britain, will he ensure that the first consideration he gives to the values and policies of his government are those which will unite and bring our country together, and make all those who voted Remain for what they thought were the internationalist values of the European Union proud again of their country for bringing those values to global Britain?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we're going to use the G7 presidency, the COP26 summit, to champion our values across the world, and in particular the one that he mentions, female education, which I think is the single policy that can really transform the outcomes across the planet. And our global objective is to help 40 million girls across the world to get a decent education.
Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His government lost control of the virus, making extra restrictions inevitable. But with no certainty, no communication and no new financial support, he's killing Nottingham businesses. Castle Rock Brewery is a Nottingham success story, but now it's on the verge of breakdown. 2 pubs closed permanently, jobs gone, and worried staff facing the prospect of being laid off with no pay. Countless other bars, restaurants and pubs tell the same story. Will he stop punishing successful Nottingham businesses for his failure and give them the help they desperately need?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I of course sympathise deeply with businesses that face difficulties because of the pandemic, though I would remind her that in her constituency the infection rate is now running at 815 per 100,000, and we must get that down. And I thank the people of Nottingham for what they're doing to get it down. And we will, of course, continue to provide the full panoply of support that we've offered and more throughout this crisis.
Julian Stardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the introduction of Tier 2 restrictions in York, can the Prime Minister be more open in communicating the evidence base for York going into Tier 2, outline a roadmap for the city's return to Tier 1 and urgently consider creation of specific support for York's hospitality industry suffering losses from the limbo that Tier 2 is creating?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Well, I can tell my honourable friend that the infection rate in York, alas, is now running at 279 per 100,000, and we must get it down. But we can get it down. We can get it down through the package of measures that we've described. And you can see in areas where people are complying with the guidance that it is having an effect. And you can see that it's having an effect, Mr. Speaker, because the R, if it weren't for the efforts and the energies of the British people, the R would be running at 3 or more. It's now between 1.2 and 1.5. It won't take much, Mr. Speaker. It won't take much, the compliance in those areas that are hit at the moment, to get that R back down below 1. That's what we're aiming for, and that is the way to get businesses across the country, in the Right Honourable Lady's constituency in Nottingham, in his constituency, back on their feet as fast as possible. It would not be sensible, in my view, to plunge them all back into a sustained series of national lockdowns, particularly in areas where the virus is low.
Question, Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has decided that people who are unable to work because of coronavirus restrictions should be paid as little as 2/3 of the national minimum wage. At the same time, the government is paying £7,000 a day for consultants to work on the failed Serco Track and Trace programme. Can the Prime Minister tell this House how on earth he thinks that is justifiable? And is this what he means by levelling up?
Mr. Speaker, the NHS Track and Trace is now testing more people than any other country in Europe. It's tested, I think, 26 million people so far, or conducted 26 million tests, and I'm also proud on her other point that we've been able to support people across the country in the way that we have. And she is not correct in what she says about the combined impact of the job support scheme and universal credit, because that lifts, they work in tandem, and that lifts people's incomes to 80%, in some cases to more than 90% of their current incomes. And that is the support that we're giving at the moment. But the best thing, Mr. Speaker, is to get our country through this crisis without going back into the social, the psychological and the emotional and the economic disaster. And disaster was the word that the party opposite used only a week or so ago. The disaster of a series of national lockdowns.
In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes. Order.